Hello, friends and neighbors. Meine liebe Stroopwafels. Good to see you. Hi, I'm Tad. Excuse me, I'm just cleaning my reading glasses off because you can't read well with dirty reading glasses. Anyway, good to see you. Thank you for joining me. It is 7 o'clock in California here, where many of you will be, but not all of you, thank goodness. Not that there's anything wrong with California, I rather love it, but I'm glad that some people from outside the area are actually tuning in. Pleasure to have you. I will check in and say hello to everybody who leaves a comment in the next few minutes. I'm going to be reading, excuse me, I'm going to be reading more of Sleeping Late on Judgment Day tonight. And what else is there that I might want to share with you guys? As I said in the introduction, or it's in the written part of the reading, the live event, the whatever. I said no politics because I would never stop, and that is true. I try to keep this a place of sanctuary. Because God knows there's lots of places to scream about what's going on in this country and the world. But there are very few quiet places now, and I'm trying to keep this a quiet place. So, but it doesn't mean I don't care about things, as I'm sure you all know. Anyway, that said, not a huge amount to discuss or divulge this week because I've basically just been finishing up The Splintered Sun. My rewrite of The Splintered Sun, which is now done, and I've written the songs. I discovered I had 3 more I had to write, so I don't want to say I banged those out, because actually writing a song takes about as long as writing 5 pages of stuff. I mean, it's, things have to rhyme. It's like really irritating. Things have to have meter and rhyme. Unlike my friend Mark, who may or may not tune in tonight, unlike my friend Mark, I have never made a true study of poetry and meter and things like that. So basically, it's all, what's the word I'm looking for? It's mimesis. It's all mimesis or mimesis, however you want to pronounce it. Miming, mimicry. But then again, that's most of what art is you start out by imitating things, and if you have any finesse, you start finding ways to change it, the things that you're imitating, into something that is less imitative, into something that has more originality to it. And eventually you absorb all those influences of the things you started out copying, and you turn them into something that, if not wholly original, is at least more original than not. And that is the aim, I think, of pretty much everybody in art. You take your influences and you channel them, and you try to blend them together and add some new thoughts of your own, hopefully lots of new thoughts of your own, and eventually you come up with something that is your own voice in an artistic sense, whether you are a painter, a sculptor, a knitter, a person who makes sculptures out of junk, whatever it is that your métier might be. God, I'm throwing out a lot of fancy words tonight. Anyway, whatever your métier may be, you will find it by starting with the things that you love and then attempting to pass them along enhanced to the next generation of people who do what you do, if that all makes any sense. Anyway, so really the only thing we've done today, besides some work, various bits of things that needed to be done, is we took the dogs out for a walk. It is Lemon's 1-year anniversary, either today or tomorrow, of coming into our household. We took the dogs out, and we are beginning to discern a slight problem, and one of those is that while Johnny still remains lukewarm towards Lemon as a personality, and I honestly, as I've said many times, I can't blame him being an old guy myself and having limited amounts of energy for whoop-de-doo and fandango. And that's not a euphemism for anything. That just, Lemon is young and full of energy. She's probably 2 years old. We don't know 100% for certain. And we got her a year ago, so she was a year old when we got her. But Johnny is, he's an older dog, and so he also has arthritis, we think, or something where he kind of limps a little bit. So he still likes to go out, but he's slow and he can't go super, super far. We go for a long walk around the outside of the school or the park athletic fields. And then Johnny is pretty much ready to go back in the car, but Lemon is still bounding and bouncing. But she doesn't want to go without Johnny. And today Deb tried to take her on another round, and she realized Johnny wasn't there and didn't want to go. Now, this is not just Lemon's crush or fondness on Johnny as her housemate. This is also, Johnny is also, he's like, when we're walking, he always has to be in front. This was one of my first big discoveries when we started taking them both out for walks together, is that Johnny needed, and I say needed, I mean emotionally, he needed to be the lead dog. He's finally gotten to be senior dog. It took a long time because our Chihuahuas, especially Walter, lasted a long time. So Johnny was already an older dog by the time he finally ascended the ranks and got a star on his shoulder or whatever. But he wants to be in the lead, but he just can't go so far these days. So we're going to have to figure this out somehow. I don't know. He anytime we take Lemon out by herself, Johnny is very sad. So we're trying to work this all out and come up with the best solution for everybody. But other than that, it was nice. I don't know if any of you, well, probably if Isaac is here tonight, we'll probably have tales of woe of the weather there. But in California, it was actually quite nice today. I say, not wanting it to sound like a boast or a brag or a hooray for us, because it's just the weirdness of weather. But we are not in the path of the current ice storm that has descended on much of the United States. So it was kind of nice day, maybe, high 50s, low 60s, put on a jacket, go for a walk. It was lovely. So that's what we did today. And I also, and this is a given with me, that, when I do have any spare time, and even if that's like right before I'm going to go to sleep or something like that, I always think about what I'm working on, which is probably one of the reasons that I have stayed relatively sane for all these years, because when I need to, I can go into that imaginary world I'm working in, whichever one it happens to be at the time, and go back to plotting and thinking and juggling various possibilities and all that stuff. So that's always a given. There's several hours every day that's involved with that, whether I'm obviously sitting down and putting words on the screen or not. I'm still, thinking and working, and I'm very grateful to be able to do that. Anyway, so that's my babble. There's not much to do, as I said, not much to babble about, because it was just a kind of a Sunday. Let me just check quickly and see who might have shown up and left a comment, and I will say hello. And I see Kristen Rule. Hello, Kristen. Good to see you. Isaac from the wintry land of Utah, and I hope that it's not going too badly out there. Cliff Winnig. Hello, Cliff. Jay. Good to see you. There's my dear friend Jay Sheckley, one of the finest human beings I know. Chris Vandal. Oh, pleasure to have you back, Chris. Good to see you. Medardo is checking in from Mexico. Good to see you, senor. Un placer, como siempre. Trish Laubacker. Oh, comeback comments. Come back. Trish Laubacker's here. Tracy McClatchy is here. Hello. Good to see you both. Tim Speckens. A pleasure. Emily Bell. Hello, Emily. Barb Ann. Oh, good. Nice to see you too. Kelly Kenrick, Mr. Mark Craigbaum, star of Stage and Screen, Claudia War, and, new name, Mads Magzano. Well, except I think we had it last week. But anyway, hello, Mads. Good to have you with us. Michael Schmidt and Christy Sanders. So Michael has come back. I haven't scared anybody away too badly. So lovely to see you all, and a pleasure to spend some time with you. I am now going to start reading, because I don't think I really have much else to say. I mean, I can babble, and I do babble. I babble and babble, but it's not a good use of the time of everybody who has Everyone has. Everybody has. Anyway, this is how I spend my day. Anyway, it's not a good use of the time of all you people who have kindly come. If I had anything important to tell you, I would. I'm hard at work thinking up or trying to think up, because I'm still at the very early stages of a sequel to Splintered Sun, because my publisher likes it and wants me to do more. And apparently I signed a contract for 2 books. So that's that. And I am working on them. I'm working on the second one, rather. But it's way too early to talk about yet, except I think it's going to have a kind of a caper type feeling to it, in the sense of, not in the sense of Las Vegas or anything like that, but in the sense of, the characters are going to have a very difficult thing that they have to pull off with stealth and trickery. And since, as I've said before, this is these books, Splintered Sun, and now this one, which I don't have a name for yet, are about a troop of outlaws. And they're essentially political outlaws. They're people who've been driven out of their homes and lost their land and things like that. So it's that kind of a story anyway. It's about the quote, little people standing up to the powers that be. And in the world where the story takes place, where the Splintered Sun takes place, the powers that be are mostly extremely corrupt and dangerous and even murderous. So they're not the good guys. The bandits, the outlaws, are the good guys. Shock, surprise, right? Especially after I likened it to things like the Robin Hood stories. It's like, whoa, shock, surprise, the bad guys are the good guys and the good guys are the bad guys. It's like, yeah, that's what we call it. Fiction. Except it's not fiction in the real world. But I said I wouldn't start into this. Okay, so let me find Bobby Dollar, which of course is more of the same. Are you getting the gist here? My feeling about power and the corruption that power exerts and things like that. I hope so, because we're all living with it every day in the world, the corruption of power and money. But again, I am going to go to the book. And the book is Sleeping Late on Judgment Day. And we are at chapter 12, Melted Frog Seeks Melted Mate. But before I start reading that, so in the last chapter, if you've not heard it yet, Bobby met Clarence's new boyfriend and found that slightly odd, even though Clarence's new boyfriend, Wendell, actually is another angel. So at least it's a good match that way. But Bobby found the fact that Clarence came to his house very strange. He also asked George, a.k.a. Fatback, to start looking into some of the things that Dr. Gustavus had talked about, including the history of Persians in the San Judas area and who might be prominent among them. Anyway, so chapter 12, Melted Frog Seeks Melted Mate. I had one more client after Clarence left, a woman who breathed her last in a hospice in the hills, a peaceful exit after a long struggle with cancer. And although there were a few issues with the woman's past, the prosecutor could deliver nothing serious enough to keep her from reaching the bosom of Abraham, or whatever exactly it is we help people reach. Honestly, I wish I did have more answers for you. I wish I knew more about how things work. That would make a much more informative story, especially for those with a theological turn of mind, but I don't. I'm an ordinary angel, a grunt. There are lots of us. Some of us live on earth and wear mortal bodies and try to defend people's souls against the lies and sometimes unpleasant truths of hell. Beyond that, I just don't know much. I mean, I regularly see the joyful saved both in heaven itself and the fields outside, but I can never get a clue to what they're thinking and feeling. It's like trying to talk to one of the people working at a theme park when they're in character. When I got home from the job, I put on some music, opened a beer, and began studying a bunch of information Fatback, a.k.a. George, had sent me. Nothing in the material was all that startling, but my porcine pal's covering email provided some unwelcome news. Bobby, here's a bit more on the bee sun and a lot of material about Persia. Honestly, I could dump hundreds and hundreds of articles on you about Persians in the Bay Area, but I'm trying to weed out the stuff you don't need. If I'm getting it wrong, let me know. You'll have to do it by email because I'm going out of town. I can't take this place anymore. I don't know what's going on. It's like living in that Amityville movie. So I had Javier and his sons clean out the trailer, and they're going to take me to go see this special vet I know near Visalia, where I can lie low. I'll only have my portable equipment, but I can still help you out if you need it. But I just can't stay here. I'll be back in a week or so, I think. So, even the swine were starting to desert the sinking ship. Not that I blamed George at all, after having seen one of the things that was actually haunting my place, but I was beginning to get a bit paranoid. First, dancing nature spirit Foxy Foxy wouldn't talk to me. Now, George had been chased off to some luxury pig spa in Tulare County. Even Clarence, the junior angel, was acting a little loopy. What next? It's not like I had a lot of friends in the first place. There wasn't too much new stuff in the Black Sun files George had sent, just more bits and pieces about what was turning out to be an ugly organization even without the neo-fascist politics. Everybody seemed to agree that they were one of the, quote, new nationalist organizations, but their membership seemed to come from many different nations, and they seemed to get nationalistic only about countries with a lot of white people in them. The local Black Sun faction was predominantly American, with ties to the Aryan Brotherhood. But a Norwegian guy named Balder von Reinmann was one of the up-and-coming leaders of the American branch. Balder wasn't the guy in charge of the whole Black Sun, though. Even Fatback's multiple sources couldn't agree on who that was. The most they could come up with was that some shadowy guy who called himself the Imperator had been the power behind the organization since the 50s, which made him pretty damn old. I also found suggestions in George's material, because, remember, he fishes in some weird backwaters, about the Black Sun's distinctly dark magic interests, and even a couple of vague references to the Swastikids, or Nightmare Children, as everyone seemed to call them, despite my name being better. Some sources went so far as to suggest that the Nightmare Children were not the worst critters the Imperator and his friends might employ on, quote, traitors, unbelievers, and other mongrel-loving scum, as one charmer, his online name was Hammer of the Jews, posted on an obscure racist message board. These were only rumors, of course, and to my irritation, not a single one seemed to suggest anything about what to do when an infestation of Swastikids hit your apartment. Killing them one by one with a silver knife, as Oksana had done, was appealing, but seemed like it could get pretty tiring. Enough with the neo-Nazis and their ugly little allies. I moved on to the Persian stuff, quickly grasping why George was frustrated with such broad parameters. But I did learn a few things about Persian Americans. They were also called Iranian Americans, but a lot of them preferred the first, not only because it separated them from the current Iranian government, but also because it underlined their ethnic pride. Not everyone in modern Iran is Persian, see? The U.S. has the most Persians anywhere outside of Iran, and now your history lesson is done. Oh, except that many, if not most of them, came into the U.S. in the early 1980s when the Ayatollah and his crazy Islamic fanboys took over. But most of what George has sent me was even less informative, primarily social news about various civic functions highlighting Persian Americans. Occasionally a crime or some other big news threw a spotlight on some facet of the community that didn't get discussed much, but mostly it was a parade of difficult Middle Eastern names without much context and therefore without much use. I did see a few names crop up over and over again and decided that what I needed to do was pick an arbitrary date, probably 1980, and look for names that came up again and again after that point. I could do some of that on my own, but I was going to have to hope George could manage some of it while he was getting his Swedish back bacon massages and seaweed trotter wraps or whatever this special pig doctor did to make him feel fresh and happy. I wandered out to get dinner and bring back another six-pack. When I returned to the apartment house, it was getting dark. The Amazons had left a note on my door that said, "We go out, but we call you later," which was nice of them. A check around my place with a flashlight found nothing swastika-like hiding in any of the corners, and the loose board in the closet still firmly nailed into place. And backed up with about 50 feet of duct tape, just for added certainty, those four-armed crawlers might be able to travel the dark dimensions, but I felt sure even they were no match for enough duct tape. I needed to share these new wrinkles with Sam, so I called and left a message and hoped he'd be back from the third way soon. Then I watched a bit of a Warriors game, but the basketball season was too young for me to care a lot, and there were too many new players this year I didn't know very well. Propped up on the couch, the TV rattling away in the background, I found myself getting sleepy and let myself drift. Yes, I had my Belgian automatic right next to me, loaded with silver slugs, too. I'm casual, but I'm not entirely stupid. I woke up to that sound again. Not the quiet scrape of creepy little children's fingers in a closet, but the thumpity thump, thumpty thump of something bouncing haphazardly against my window. It was a different window this time, in the bathroom, and it was hard to reach because I had to half lean on the sink while standing on the edge of the tub. The glass was that kind you can only see through a little, like a bunch of little round funhouse mirrors, so I couldn't make out what was out there, except it looked about the size of a sparrow. But it certainly had the same disturbing habit of going thump, thump, thump. There was no way I could get the window open fast enough to lean out and grab anything that wasn't already both extremely stupid and bleeding to death, but I eased up the window a few inches, the bumping stopped, and then turned off the bathroom light and retreated to sit on the closed toilet seat with my toothbrush glass in my hand. Whatever it was came back a few minutes later and began bumping again, this time on the upper part of the window. I waited as patiently as I could, and considering the thing couldn't have been much larger than a finger puppet, while I was full-size and combat trained, I was surprisingly nervous. Because it wasn't natural, see? I know that sounds odd coming from an angel, especially one who's been to hell, but you don't expect anything in hell to be normal. In your own apartment, you expect normal. You need normal. So I sat there and tried to keep my breathing even, and eventually the thing bumbled its way down the window and then flopped onto the windowsill, where it bounced around for a moment, wings buzzing. It was no bird or bug, that was for sure. Even in the dim bathroom, I could see that it was too big to be an insect, and its wings were too small for a bird. I waited until it bumped along a few inches, then I shot up from the toilet seat and clapped the glass over it. It didn't even fight. That was the strange bit. A bee, a wasp, you put a glass over them and they get angry. This thing just kept diddling along as though its mission in life was to bump against glass, but whether inside it or outside didn't matter much. I got up and flicked on the light. If I'd been hoping it was a crippled bird, I was disappointed. It wasn't a bug either. I'd been right about that. But even in the bright light from above the medicine cabinet, I still didn't know what exactly it was, except that it was extremely and obviously wrong. Quick description. Imagine a small frog. Now, imagine that frog owed money to the mob, so they took it out back and gave it a severe beating, deforming its face so that it almost looked like a tiny, ugly dwarf, and also breaking several of its bones that later healed back crooked. Now, imagine the frog, instead of being a healthy shade of green or even brown, was mostly gray and blue and extremely slimy. Oh, and don't forget the dragonfly wings in a lovely shade of translucent crimson, and the 3 eyes, also red, glowing like the LEDs on your DVR. I stared at the thing I'd caught for a long time, wondering if I should just go find a hammer and beat it to jelly. It clearly didn't belong on Earth, but if it was some kind of spy or assassin creature sent by the Black Sun, they seemed to have chosen badly. After throwing itself against the inside of the glass for a while, it just squatted and let its wings curl. Its mouth moved oddly, as though it was having trouble breathing, and it occurred to me I could just let it suffocate, or even hasten the process by sticking a lighted candle in there or something. Yes, I know. It sounds cowardly, but if you'd seen it, you wouldn't have wanted to touch it either, even to kill it. Trust me, you'd have moved out of the apartment and called in an airstrike. I mean, it was ugly. At last I got a round chunk of cardboard that had most recently been part of the packing for a frozen pizza, then slid it carefully under the glass. The thing didn't really have feet, more like a pair of mushroom stems that might have been made from slug muscle. But it didn't seem too bothered by the cardboard and just stepped up onto it as it slid underneath. Then I took the whole weird package to the living room. I put a heavy book on top of the glass, then went to see if the Scythians were back and could identify it as one of the Black Sun's special friends, but they were still out, although it was now almost 10 at night. I went back to my place, half hoping that the thing had knocked over the glass and managed to escape the apartment so I wouldn't have to deal with it. But the horrid little lump was still sitting on my cheap coffee table, staring back at me with 3 eyes worth of incomprehension. I'll say this, it didn't seem particularly malicious, but even if it had been wearing the face of a famous Hollywood star, it wasn't going to get many dates. It was making the mouth movements again, which made it look more than ever like something crooning invitations across a dark swamp. Melted frog seeking melted mate. Taking pity, I lifted the bottom of the glass just a little to let in some air, and when I did so, I heard something thin and squeaky coming from inside the glass. Words. I swear by the highest actual words. In English. I could make out only one. Revenge. But that was enough. What the hell was this thing? I went to the kitchen and rummaged around until I found the strainer I'd used the last time I cooked anything for myself, which had been spaghetti. The answer to your next question is probably about 14 months earlier. I brought the strainer out, put it over the glass, then rattled the whole thing until the glass tipped over. It certainly didn't hurry, but eventually the flying frog thing bumbled out of the sideways glass into the larger enclosure of the strainer. It settled its grotesque little body again, blinked all 3 eyes, and said, dearest Bobby. Chapter 13. The Great Dictator. When I heard that ugly little creature say my name, I jumped back about 3 feet, then threw my jacket over the whole mess, the strainer and the upended glass and the nasty little blob itself. I could still hear its tiny, whiny voice under the jacket. My heart beat so hard it felt like it was going to break my rib cage. No, not just because an ugly little hellbug was sitting on my coffee table and knew my name. I was freaking right out because despite its high-pitched, ragged tones and odd combination of helium and horseradish, the cadence and the phrasing were all too familiar. The voice belonged to Kaz. A moment later, and almost as shocking and sudden as that recognition, I suddenly wondered if this was somehow my Countess of Cold Hands herself, escaped from hell after being punished by Eligor. I jerked the jacket away. The thing was still droning on. If it was Kaz, she sounded like an answering machine message that was starting to wear out. Hope you stopped shouting at this thing by now. It's not me, the little horror was saying. It's a Nizik, a minor demon, a message carrier. Don't worry how I got hold of it or how it got out of hell to reach you. Now, if you got yourself that drink I suggested, sit down and get comfortable. I need to tell you several things. I was too stunned to do anything but slump onto the couch and stare at the winged gob of phlegm as it parroted back the message my beloved had somehow taught it. The first is that I lied to you. Don't feel bad. I lied to myself, too. It's only now that I know you're safely out of hell that I can tell you that whatever you wish to call it, need, obsession, insane attraction, love, well, I also feel it, Bobby. I have since the first. But everything else I said is true. It doesn't matter what we feel because everything else is against us. And I mean everything. I won't torment you with thoughts of what could be, because they can't. But I won't cheat you out of the most important part anymore. Whatever it is you're feeling, Bobby, I feel it too. I cannot imagine not seeing you again. But that's exactly how it has to be. Eligor is finally satisfied. His cruel trick worked. He got the feather back, he made you suffer, he made me suffer, and even had the extra pleasure of making Marmora, the drowned girl, suffer as well. But knowing you, you're determined to get some kind of revenge. You must forget about it. As things stand, he'll probably leave you alone now. You can't hope to survive his full attention again. But I will survive, Bobby. I will go on. I am not some mortal woman, some comparative child who cannot live with pain and difficulty. I will survive. I shared the best moments of my life and myself with you. That will keep me during the times ahead. I love you. There. I'm so sorry I never said it to your face. Now, please, forget me. When it finished reciting, the Nizik sat there slowly, blinking all its eyes, but otherwise motionless as a lump of particularly dirty wax or a dead mouse that had been under the couch a long, long time. After a few moments, it started over again from the beginning of the message in the same disturbing, not quite Kaz voice. I listened to the bits I'd missed when I'd covered it with my jacket, none of them particularly important, except that they were more words from the woman I loved and who I sometimes thought I'd never hear or see again, and so each was as precious as a diamond. But as it got back onto the part I'd already heard, I decided I'd had enough. It was like listening to Kaz down an old-fashioned long-distance line as she demonstrated the effect of multiple strokes on human speech. I threw my jacket over the little horror again. But even though a part of me was grateful, no, ecstatic, to hear from Kaz and thrilled by the substance of the message, she did love me, she did. I was also feeling a slow burn that was beginning to heat up. It was Eligor's name that started it, or rather it was the way Kaz had suggested that now was a good time to slink off into the undergrowth, so Eligor the horseman would forget all about me. He was in a good mood, she said. The monster who had tortured both Kaz and me, not to mention brought untold horror to human lives for countless thousands of years, was in a good mood. Yeah, that cheered me right up. And if I was really, really lucky, he was bored with torturing and humiliating me. I mean, yeah, he was still holding prisoner the woman I loved, probably raping and tormenting her, but I wasn't supposed to dwell on that. I'd thought for a long time that there would be nothing higher on my bucket list than squeezing the black, sticky blood out of the Grand Duke of Hell's black, sticky heart, and that was still true. If I had been given a choice at that moment between destroying him and destroying Anaita, even if it meant she'd get me for sure, well, there would have been no contest. Eligor was an obscenity. The entire universe would benefit from his sudden and hopefully violent retirement. But Eligor didn't matter right now, because there was literally nothing I could do about him. I'd already made my way through hell once, suffered hideously, and found that just as I'd suspected, I couldn't stand up to him for even a second. And I'd paid for that stupid decision with more hours of horrifying pain than any being could suffer anywhere else in the universe and still be able to renew his magazine subscriptions. But what mattered was that the bastard still had Kaz. Anaita had Eligor's horn. and I didn't have a chance of getting her without it. I'd failed with the feather, but I knew Eligor would swap my beautiful countess for the horn without a moment's hesitation, because it would lift a big weight of concern for him. Without the horn, nobody in heaven or hell could ever prove that he'd made a deal with an angel. He might not give a shit about Bobby Dollar, but he was scared to hand any advantage to the other hell lords, Fat Slug Prince Citri and Grand President Kame and the rest. So, despite the craziness, the joy, and the bitterness that were all burning through me after hearing Kaz's voice, nothing had actually changed. My only hope for a happy life, probably my only hope for life, period, was to get that horn somehow and then force Eligor to give her back to me. I went and fixed myself that drink Kaz had suggested. I could hear the winged snot bag muttering away underneath my jacket, and it occurred to me that I might be able to use the same creature to send a message back to her. I had no idea if it would actually work, but as someone once said, fortune favors the brave. Sam usually added, and stomps on the stupid, but I don't think that's entirely true. I've done all right so far, and nobody's ever called me smart without tacking ass onto the end. I polished off the vodka tonic pretty quick, then lifted the jacket. The nasty little thing was trying to fly again, but of course not succeeding much, just bumbling around against the metal cage of the strainer while repeating its message like a broken toy. I lifted the strainer and reached in and was surprised by how hot the thing was, like silly putty sautéed in butter. I dropped it, almost sucked my fingers until I realized what I'd be putting in my mouth, then grabbed a kitchen towel and tried again. "Don't worry, Hal," it was saying as I lifted it up, but it was squirming a bit too. "Shut up," I explained and gave it a nasty squeeze, but not so roughly that it would pop or anything. "Got out of hell," it said quietly. I squeezed it again, harder. "Shut up, you flying turd." After a few rounds of this merry game, the little blotch finally got the hint and stopped muttering Kaz's message. It sat in the towel, 3 red eyes staring at me, looking like something that a dog had eaten and then put back into play. I leaned in close to feel the heat coming off of it. "I'm going to get you out," I said as slowly and clearly as I could. "Pack a suitcase. I don't know how long it will take, but I am going to get you out. I swear by the highest." The Nizik stared at me, but I had clearly convinced it to not make any noise at all. I gave it the message again, this time with another squeeze, then again, and again. After about the 5th time, it goggled its eyes, opened its mouth, but instead of repeating what I said, it let out a belch like the tiniest corpse fart you can imagine. It was still enough to make me lean back, eyes watering. "All right, you little fuckstick," I said. "You want to play with the big boys? You want to step to me?" I wrapped it in the towel like putting Francis Farmer in a straitjacket, then carried it into the kitchen. "Last chance. Repeat after me. I'm going to get you out." But the Nizik only looked at me without a glimmer of understanding, like the world's smallest complaints department employee. So I opened my refrigerator and shoved it into the freezer, towel and all, and went back to pour myself a second drink. 5 minutes later, I opened the freezer door. The thing was lying on its back, gasping like a landed fish, and something steaming hot was running out of its mouth and ear holes and nostril slits. I held it while it shivered and crawled around in circles on my hand. It was much easier to hold now, and then gave it the message again. It didn't do anything useful, so I put it back in the freezer. This process went on for about an hour. I put the sports news on the television and tried to make myself relax, but it didn't work. Too many crazy things had been happening lately. Armed Amazons, weird warnings, Dear John, snot goblin messages from the woman I loved, not to mention Nazi thugs and demonic arm spiders, all shoving to get onto my calendar. I was tired confused, and mad as hell. I was pissed off. After I took it out for maybe the fourth time, the Nizik seemed to be getting the picture. It lay panting in my hand, sucking back in the hot liquids it had sweated out in an attempt to keep itself from freezing. And when I tried my message again, it actually opened its mouth and croaked, "I'm going, I'm going, I'm going." I thought it was just being melodramatic until I realized those were the first two words of my message. That was all it would give me, though, so I shot it a stern look. "Any man don't keep order gets a night in the box," I warned. Then I shoved it back in the freezer, but I didn't leave it in too long this time. I had downed maybe 4 vodkas by the time the turd ball finally managed to repeat the whole message to me. I'm sure Kaz had some better way to program the ugly bastard, but we all make do with what we have, and I was determined to let her know not only that I had heard the message, but that it didn't change anything important. I was a little wobbly on my feet. I haven't been drinking that much lately, as I think I said, but feeling a bit more than a bit triumphant when someone knocked on the door. I wrapped the towel around the flying hobgoblin so I could peek out and see who it was, then opened the door. Sam walked in. He looked me up and down and said, "You look weird. What's that in your hand?" I looked down at the squirming kitchen towel. "Hang on," I said. "I'm almost finished here." I opened the towel and the Nizik sat up, still shivering, its wings like crumpled cellophane. "What do you say, you ugly little fart sparrow? What do you say?" "I think you need professional help more than you need a new pet, but I'm glad you're trying to give your life meaning," said Sam. "Shut up," I told him. "Any man talking loud gets a night in the box." "Oh, Lord, it's the Cool Hand Luke thing." Sam shook his head and stared at the Nizik. "What is that?" "Hold on. Like I said, I'm almost done." I made the tiny monstrosity repeat the entire message through without mistakes, then took it to the window and stuck my hand out. It sat there on my palm for a moment, then spread its wings and buzzed off in awkward circles like a dangerously overloaded helicopter. "So, this is how you spend your evenings now?" Sam asked, "professing your undying love to random snot bugs." "Snot a snot bug," I said grumpily, then laughed. Snot. "No, snot goblin. Incredibly huge difference." "Shit, B, how many drinks have you had?" "Hardly any. 4? Maybe 7 or 8 if you count beers. Doesn't matter. That was from Kaz. She sent me a message. And spared no expense, clearly. What a gal." "You are an asshole." I knew there was something I wanted to talk to Sam about, but damned if I could remember. Actually, I realized I was pretty much damned no matter what. I laughed again. "Coffee," he said. "You'll still be an idiot, but you'll be an alert idiot." He helped me up and kept a firm grasp on my elbow as we went down the stairs to his car, one of his usual selection of ultra-boring rides. Sam always drives cars that look like the government gave them to him. Not the CIA sniper rifle high-tech government either. I mean, he drives shit that makes him look like he works for the post office or the Bureau of Prisons. We wound up in a 24-hour joint down on the Camino Real at the edge of Spanish Town. After I'd had a couple of cups of coffee, I began to feel like maybe life wasn't so bad after all. So I told Sam everything that had happened. Kaz's Nizik, the Black Sun faction and their swastikids, the Amazons, and even about my warning from Temuel. Then the alcohol started to wear off, and all I had was the caffeine. I was seriously wondering which of the other customers I should strangle to burn off some of my irritation with the world when Sam came back from a trip to the restroom. "They say man proposes, God disposes," he told me, squeezing in behind the table. "But seems to me like I have to do most of the disposing. Man, I think I just pissed out several gallons in there. I'm serious, like a racehorse." "Not really interested," I told him. Actually, I got something I need to tell you about. Sam checked his coffee, which had gone cold, and waved for our ancient waitress to freshen it up. What's that? Maybe some food would help me, I decided. I was really jittery now. Maybe some pie. You asked me if you could come to Kainos. Kainos? That's what we call the place. You know, the third way. You said you wanted to check it out. Hey, don't make it sound like I saw the light or something. This isn't a conversion, man. I just need to make a fact-finding trip. Well, that's the problem, B. You're not going to be making that trip. Things have changed. What does that mean? That the operation has been shut down, more or less. Kephas just told us that we're not bringing any more souls, and that from now on there won't be anyone going in or out except for me and the others who've been helping, the rest of the Magians. Magians was the name of Sam's group of angels had taken in their quest to find suitable human subjects, willing to risk their souls to join the third way after death. So you're saying I can't get in? I have no idea what kind of controls or whatever Kephas has, but I'm pretty sure you'd be noticed if you even tried, which would put me square in the crosshairs. Remember, Bobby, unlike you, I don't have anywhere else to go if the shit hits the fan. I felt weird, exhausted and wired at the same time, and even if it wasn't making me feel cheerful anymore, I'm pretty sure the alcohol was still fucking with my judgment. I probably shouldn't have broached the subject, not then, not there, but I was beginning to feel I needed to know where everybody really stood, who was truly on my side. Sam, I gotta tell you something. I know who Kephas is. And you know what? It's your Kephas who's out to get me. He just stared at me for a long time, then picked up his spoon and stirred his black coffee for another lengthy interval. Talk, he said at last. And I did. You have to remember, I'd been holding this in a long time, ever since the dead murderer Smiler told me that Kephas was his boss too, and Walter Sanders passed along something that made me realize that Kephas was probably Anaita. I had to explain the whole thing to Sam, of course. I'd held back a lot from him, how I'd met Walter in hell and the whole works, and it took a long time to bring him up to date. Meanwhile, Sam just sat and sipped a little coffee, said nothing at all, but I have to say the vibe he was putting out was not a harmonious one. I was praying that when I finished, he'd do something good. Slap my shoulder, tell me he was with me to the end, or come up with some better explanation that made sense out of everything. But instead, when I stopped talking, he just kept looking at me for a few seconds, then said, "You done?" I said I was. Good. Because I have to say that's the biggest bunch of horse shit I've ever heard. And I've been shoveling the stables of untruth for many, many years. He leaned back. Look at you, Dollar. You're a fucking wreck. You're in love with a woman who was burned at the stake and admits herself she deserved it. You went to hell for her, for heaven's sake. You pissed off one of the heaviest hitters on the opposition. You got the compasses torn to pieces because of it. And now you're trying to tell me that the thing I've worked on with all my heart for years is just some scam. In fact, you probably think it's just another plot to get you. Do you think I'm in on it too, Bobby? That because I kept some secrets, I'm your enemy? That I'm working with Kephas to get you? No, Sam, don't be stupid. Stupid? Shit, don't just look at yourself. Listen to yourself. You move every few weeks. You got bullet holes in your apartment wall. You don't sleep, and you got all your bosses pissed off at you, not to mention the hordes of hell. But instead of just making a clean break and coming with me to Kainos, you've been determined all along to do it your own way. Well, old chum, I hate to tell you this, but your way sucks. While I was still sitting there with my mouth hanging open like a gaffed fish, he stood up and threw a 5 on the table for his coffee, then tossed a 20 in front of me. Get yourself a cab, man. I don't want to spend any more time with you right now. If you weren't covered in bruises, I'd be tempted to take you outside and pop you one in the nose. He took a couple of steps and then turned around. I get it that you're miserable. I get it that you think the world is hopelessly fucked, both the human world and the world we live in. Sid, I more or less agree. But that doesn't mean I have to go down and roll in it with you. You may be right about some of it even. But that just doesn't mean you're right about all of it. And at the moment, I don't care about any of it. Sam, I'm sorry. Tell me some other time. Maybe I'll listen, he said, walking away. He was in such a mood that he accidentally dragged his coat across the plates of two people sitting in the booth next to ours. Sam's big, though, and when he's angry, only the suicidal would jump up and start something. They didn't even start talking about what a jerk he was until the glass door had closed behind him. After he'd gone, I just sat, staring at my coffee, watching it get cold. The waitress wandered by a couple of times and offered to freshen it up, but I just waved her away. I didn't want any more fucking coffee. Chapter 14. Other People's Problems. I didn't get much sleep that night, but for once it wasn't because of bad dreams. I had the distinct feeling that a noose was being drawn tight around my neck, tighter by the day. I had one hope, and that was to find the horn and get it away from Anaita. But meanwhile, I was losing friends and allies right and left. I didn't think Sam was gone for good. Not really, but I wasn't used to him being that pissed at me, and I still didn't know all the facts about his arrangement with Kephas. On top of it all, I still had a few trust issues with him. After all, he had lied to me from the beginning about the third way, and that was something I hadn't believed could ever happen. Shit, maybe he'd known he was working for Anaita all this time. Maybe the bluster was all faked. I didn't even know how to think about that. It seemed so impossible. But if I couldn't call on Sam, who did that leave for Team Bobby? Foxy had made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with any of this. I believe the good old phrase scared shitless applied, if you could say that about a Japanese nature spirit. Clarence was a maybe, since he still hadn't entirely cleared himself after starting out his career as a spy and trying to arrest Sam. Of course, I'd clocked him on the skull with a gun, so it wasn't like I'd been a great mentor either. George the Internet Pig was out in the Central Valley somewhere. The Solihull sisters would have been out of their league completely, and the Broken Boy was more broken than usual after answering my last set of questions. Which left me what? 2 Amazons I just met, and my guns and cars supplier, Orban. In other words, 2 women who didn't speak great English yet, and an immortal Hungarian who never would. Anyone else? Dr. Gustavus, but he was too much a weird unknown to count on. Of course, I'd almost forgotten my old friend G-Man, a.k.a. Garcia Windhover, the wannabe gangsta idiot kid who thought he was one of my operatives. He'd do anything for me, despite his complete and utter lack of qualifications or even rudimentary intelligence. His English wasn't too good either, even though it was his first language. Sure, I could always bet my immortal soul on G-Man, or just shoot myself now. I wrestled with some heavy questions that night, things that could affect not just my afterlife, but perhaps even the balance of heaven and hell. When at last I gave up on any really solid sleep and made myself some coffee, I had come to at least one major decision, something that scared me badly, but which had to be done. It was time to sell my car. You're not serious. It was always hard to tell with Orban whether he was asking a question. It was always hard to tell with Orban whether he was asking a question, making a statement, or talking to someone else entirely, because he didn't make a lot of eye contact and was usually surrounded by bearded men who wanted his attention, a bit like Snow White during dwarf mating season. So I waited until the latest group of armament mechanics had eddied away. Orban repeated his earlier remark, which proved he'd been talking to me all along. Wish I wasn't, I said. I loved that car like an ordinary man loves his mother. More because that car never gave me liverwurst for lunch or made me wear hand-me-downs to school. But I need the money, and I honestly don't know if I can ever drive it again without feeling like America's most wanted. Orban walked with me to the garage and pulled the tarp off my muscle car, my beloved AMC Matador machine. The coppery paint job and the black and white checkerboard upholstery were so beautiful I almost cried. It is certainly an ugly fucker, he said, but the engine runs like a dream. Nice new 401. Don't remind me. Why did everyone have to talk shit about how my car looked? Didn't anyone in this town have any art in their souls? I still owe you 10. How much you think you can get for it? If I can find a blind man who likes to drive fast, maybe 25 total. He squinted at me and frowned, which made him look like an Eastern European Popeye the Sailor. How bad are things? If you really want to sell, I can give you another 10 now, if that will help. It would. It really would. I was already beginning to think strange, un-Bobby-like thoughts about holing up in the woods with a bunch of guns and growing a beard. Or maybe getting a job with Orban, since that's how everybody he employed already looked. But I definitely wanted liquid assets, and fast. Because of his business, or more specifically his brand of customers, Orban was always handling cash, which was well known among the drug dealers and smash-and-grab robbers who tended to patronize him, both for guns and well-armored vehicles. But even so, nobody had ever tried to rob him. This probably says almost as much about Orban himself as about the dozens of well-armed guys who worked there and were pretty much on the premises all night and all day. Orban claimed he'd been the designer for the cannons at the siege of Constantinople. Now, don't bother to Google, I'll tell you, AD 1453. He might be nothing more than a formidable liar, but considering that my own girlfriend had been around that long, I was more willing than most to accept that as possible. He also claimed he had simply decided not to die, and that was why he hadn't. If you spent a half hour with him, especially if he was giving you one of those looks of his, you'd probably take his word for it like I did. He isn't a big man, but he has presence, like a porcupine has sharp stuff. In his office, he counted me out 100 Benjamins, and I signed off on the pink slip. Then he broke out a bottle of wine, and we had a drink. Here's another Orban tip. Never tell him the Hungarian stuff he drinks tastes like cow piss. He claims it's called bull's blood, but I think that's a translation error. I promptly gave him a couple $100 back for his guys to paint the ancient Datsun I'd been driving for a while. Another Orban special. I would have liked a fresh start and a new never-seen car in case I had to disappear, but I settled for having the old car sprayed an unexciting black. I'd throw some dust on it when it dried. While they were taking care of that, I wandered down the salt piers to a little burger joint and had a late breakfast. While I waited for my hash browns, sausage, and eggs, I went through Fatback's Persian stuff again, then emailed him with directions on narrowing the search. Seagulls fought loudly on the railing outside the window. It was hard not to imagine that the crows who came to pick my bones when Anaida was done with me might sound a little like that. And we are going to stop there because that's the end of a section, although not the end of a chapter. So it is now virtually 8 p.m. Actually, it's 7:59, but by the time I finish yammering on, it will be 8 o'clock, I'm sure. So first off, thank you. I'm assuming that we continue to broadcast all through things. Yes, okay, we apparently did because people are talking about AMC cars, which is always a subject worthy of attention and amusement. Anyway, so I will be back next week, again, barring flood, famine, or furries, and I will continue reading from sleeping late on Judgment Day then. Until that time, until we are together again, I implore you all to take good care of yourselves, because you are important, and not just to me. Take good care of your loved ones and friends. Keep an eye out for those around you who might need a kind word or a helping hand. And yeah, that's it, basically. That's the whole subject, kindness. That's the whole reason. That's the whole plan. Whoops. That's the whole plan, kindness. And I will talk to you soon. So peace, be well. I'll see you. Ciao ragazzi.